Power built on fear always crumbles. But what happens when the fall comes, not from armies, but from the quiet hands that have served in silence all along? Welcome to Mindful Musing, a journey with God, where faith comes alive, and every story reminds us that the God of yesterday is still the God of today. Here, we dive deep into the untold wonders of Scripture, immersive, emotional, powerful. Stories that stir your spirit, ignite your faith, and draw you closer to the heart of God. Subscribe now and join the journey, as we step into one of the most astonishing moments in all of biblical history. Jezebel ruled with an iron will, her name whispered in reverence and terror. No one challenged her. No one defied her. She believed herself untouchable, unshaken by the shifting winds of power. But history has a way of turning on the smallest moments, on the unseen hands that wait for the right time to strike. The story of Jezebel is not just one of a queen's fall, it is the story of justice, rebellion, and the silent figures who decided fate in the shadows. The sun bled across the horizon, staining the skies over Jezreel in a deep crimson hue, like an omen, like a whisper of something inevitable. Inside the palace, Jezebel sat before her mirror, the air thick with the scent of myrrh and oil. She dragged the brush across her eyelids, darkening them, sculpting her features into something almost divine. Her fingers were steady, her heart was not. Word had spread, Jehu, the warrior king, was coming. The streets murmured his name like wind before a storm. Yet, Jezebel refused to flee. Cowards ran. Queens did not. With measured grace, she fastened her royal robes, pulled the gold bangles onto her wrists, and stood at the grand window that overlooked Jezreel's streets. She would meet Jehu as a queen. She would face death as a ruler, never as a fallen woman. But in the shadows of her palace, behind the silk veils and towering columns, the women of her court watched. Jezebel had ruled not with wisdom, but with fear. Prophets vanished under her orders. Blood stained the streets in the name of her gods. Those who whispered against her whispered in secret, their voices swallowed before they ever reached her ears. But there were eyes in the palace, eyes that had seen everything. The attendants, the handmaidens, the women who brushed her hair, dressed her in silk, prepared her feasts, they had watched her rise. They had watched her reign. They had watched her slaughter. And now, as Jehu marched toward the gates, they watched her downfall, too. The ground trembled with the weight of approaching hooves. Jehu rode into the courtyard, dust curling behind him like war smoke. His soldiers stood at his side, watching the palace doors, watching the woman whose name had become legend. Jezebel smirked. Power gleamed in her gaze as she leaned forward, her voice sharp, taunting. Had Zimri peace, who slew his master? A challenge. A warning. She was not afraid. But then, a voice rose, not from the battlefield, but from the walls above. Who is on Jehu's side? A silence thick enough to drown and fill the air. Jezebel turned sharply, her painted eyes scanning the balcony above her, where her own attendants now stood. She saw them. She had dressed them in gold, had given them a place in her empire. Yet here they were, standing against her. Before she could speak, before she could command, they moved. Hands that once served became hands that shattered a throne. Jezebel did not have time to scream. She fell. Her body struck the stone below, hard, final. The earth swallowed the sound, yet the silence rang louder than war drums. Jehu stepped forward, glancing down at her lifeless form. There was no ceremony. No mourning. Only blood soaking into the ground. And then the dogs came. They did not hesitate. They tore at the queen whose name had made nations tremble. Her flesh became dust before the sun set. When they came later to bury her, they found nothing but bone, unrecognizable, erased by the teeth of beasts and the justice of unseen hands. History would remember the warlords. The kings. The mighty hands of men who seized power. Yet Jezebel did not fall by a warrior's blade. She was not slain in battle. She was cast down by the silent hands of women who had long stood in her shadow. They would not be named in history. Their voices would not be recorded. But their actions? Their actions turned a throne into dust. Because sometimes, revolutions do not come with swords. Sometimes, they come with silent hands, and a single push. Jezebel's rule had been absolute. Her downfall had been unwritten, unexpected, and unstoppable. Her blood soaked the earth, but her name lived on, not in glory, but as a warning. Power built on fear will always crumble under the weight of the unseen. The palace walls did not mourn Jezebel. The streets did not weep for her. Her legacy, once feared, had dissolved into dust, her power devoured by the very hands that once adorned her in splendor. She fell, not in battle, not by sword, but by the ones who had seen too much and said nothing, until the time was right. Power is fragile. Authority built on fear will always find its reckoning, not always through war, not always through bloodshed, but through those who have watched, waited, and dared to push when the moment came. Jezebel thought herself eternal. But history remembers her fall more than it ever remembered her throne.